Alright, so this video is about 2D arrays, two-dimensional arrays. You can make multiple dimensional arrays, but 2D is what we're going to learn today. So eventually you're going to create a program that is tic-tac-toe, and this video will help you go about doing that. So when you declare a 2D array, it's this very similar to 1D arrays, which is what you guys know already. So I'm going to just call this 2D R, and we'll do something like this. So as you imagine, what you know now is a single bracket pair, you just add the other one. So this first one here is actually the rows. So if you think of a checkerboard, you have two dimensions, you have rows and columns. This first one will be how many rows there are, and in each of the rows, how many columns are there across. So you can view it that way. And you can initialize your array, your two-dimensional array, the same way. So let's start out with a 2x2 array and do it that way. So in order for us to further go along actually seeing how these values change when we change them, we should learn how to go through each of the values of the array. And if you haven't figured out thus far how to get to each element of this array, is 2D, or a nested for loop is going to be required. So one for loop is going to go through all of the columns, one for loop is going to go through all of the rows, and one by one we'll print them out. So I'm going to make two counters. We'll do I and j, and we'll just start here. This is what I like to do. Alright, so indices of the arrays always start at 0, right? So you'll initialize your first counter I to 0. I like to access rows on the outer for loop and columns on the inner for loop. That's just me, but if you want to go the other way, you absolutely can. So in both cases, the size of the rows is 2. So I can set it up that way, add 1 to I each time. And then on the inside of this for loop, we can initialize the other counter to 0. And the number of columns is 2 in this case. Alright, so with that, let me just print this out and show you what it looks like. I'm going to print out the I and j in that order, and give it, we'll print out, yeah, we'll just print this out every new line. Okay, just to show you what the numbers look like. So I'm going to run that. Everything starts out at 0, right? I equals 0, then j equals 0. Thus, the first time it gets in, I and j are 0, prints out 0 and 0. The inner loop runs again before it reaches the outer loop, right? So the inner loop will finish before it continues on to the next loop of the outer loop. It sounds very confusing, but if you slow it down, think about it, it'll make sense. So notice the columns, the inner loop, changes first before the outer loop changes. So you get 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, with the j's changing quicker than the i's. Okay, with that being said, we can take these numbers, these i's and j's, and just put them in as the index, I and j in here. So instead of printing the I and j, we're just going to print the value there. Well, I guess I could keep that in there. So this is what I'll do. %d, %d, and the value at that position. So to access an element of the array, you simply use the name of the array and give it the indices. So here we go. Hopefully it's all zeros. I'm pretty sure it is. So I'm going to run it. What we have here is at 0, 0, we have 0, 0, 1, 0, etc. You can almost think of this like a square that's split up into 4 sections. The top left section be 0, 0, 0, sorry, and the top right section would be 0, 1, and then the bottom left section would be 1, 0, and the bottom right section would be 1, 1. So let's see if I can print it out that way to let it make sense. So I'm going to reduce, I'll just comment this out. I'm going to reduce what's printed to the screen here. So printf, we're only going to print the value with a space at that particular index. Okay. So after an entire row, which is one loop of this outer loop, is completed, I want to put a new line to show that we're on a different row. So after all this is completed, we're done with the first row. Throw a new line at the end. So now I'm going to run it. Now we have a square block, 0, 0, 0, 0. So if you watch my mouse, I go from the top left to top right to bottom left to bottom right. That's the order that it's running. So when we initialize an array, we can do it many ways. So I'm going to comment this out, and let's put in values that actually mean something to us here, or give us meaning to the positions. So you can give it values like one-dimensional arrays, but this time you're going to have some inner portions with the curly brackets. You can pretend like this inner one is for a singular dimension array that you already know. So this is the first row, this will be the top row, and this will be the second row. So I'm going to put 1, 2, so the top portion of the array will hold 1 and 2, and the bottom will hold 3 and 4. So this is the very first element of the top row, so this will be top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. Let's give it a try. There it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, following that order. So now I'm going to want you guys to make a tic-tac-toe board. So that's a, 3 by 3, right? And we're going to introduce logic of, checking for wins. How do you know when someone won? How do you know if you can put something there in a certain element? Is it empty, etc.? Now, all that logic is surrounded by being able to access all portions or all elements of the array. And this nested for loop allows you to do it. In a 3 by 3, you would initialize your array. Instead of 2 and 2, you'd use 3 and 3. And the for loops would go up to 3 and 3, right? Instead of 2 and 2. So now that we know how to loop through things, just to show you how to manually change the values at each position. So let's say I want to change the 3 to a 7. Well, we know that this is row 0, and this is row 1, and this is column 0. So this is row 0's column 0, this is row 1's column 0, right? Because indices start at 0. You have to remember that. All right. So let's change the 3 value to 7. So we'd say 2dar, and I said it was row 1 and column 0. And we'll change it to a 7. So when we run this, hopefully it says 1274. And sure enough, it does. 1274. Okay? Alright, so let's say we'll have the user input the values of the array. Well, we can use this for loop here to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it so we can print it later. And I'm going to adjust the inner parts of this inner for loop. So if you want to change this section of the code right here, this inner for loop is key to accessing every single element. So if you want to access every single element, like having the user input values for every single element, this is where it's going to happen. So I'll do this. Printf, enter in value, and then I'll put %d, %d, so I know which one it's on. And we'll do I and j, excuse me, and we'll use scanf we're going to take in integers, and we're going to literally store it at that position in the array. And you need your ampersand, the name of the array, and then I and j, just like you did with single array or single dimension arrays, right? So I'm going to do that. I'm going to enter. Okay, enter in a value for 0, 0. Let's say it's 2. Enter in a value for 0, 1. We'll do 9 or 8. And for 1, 0, that should be the bottom left. We'll do 1. And for the bottom right, I'll do 4. So there it is, 2, 8, 1, and 4. So now you can imagine for tic-tac-toe, it's going to be asking, you know, where do you want to put your x? As 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1. And you can figure out a way to associate it that way. So let's try and come up with something clever. So with the for loop, it'll go through every single element. When you're asking someone or a user to enter in where they want to make their move, you're going to be asking for the actual coordinates, like exactly where that is. So top left, top right, or which row, which column. So for tic-tac-toe, I'm going to comment this out. We're going to be asking for the which row and which column. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to say printf, enter in which row. And we're going to do the same for a column. Which column? And the values can only be between 0 and 1 for this particular example because it's a 2 by 2, right? Indices start at 0, thus 2 elements would be 0, 1, right? And tic-tac-toe would be 0, 2. Okay, so now we're going to do, let's store them in temporary variables, excuse me. UI1, UI2, scanf underscore s, %d, ampersand. I could have named it UI column. Maybe I should have, but I'll put it here. Okay, so this saves the row, and this one saves the column. Okay, so now when it's the player's turn, let's say it's player 1, we'll put a player 1, or we'll put a 1 there. If it's player 2, we'll put a 2 there, right? Normally it's an X or 0, or an O, right? X or O. I'll let you figure that out when it comes time to do the assignment. So we'll ask them which row, which column, and we'll just place it there. You'll have to do the checks to see if it's empty or not in your assignment. So assuming the input is good, you can do a check for valid inputs like we have been all semester long. You do it that way. So row is the first one, and that's saved in UI1, and UI2 holds the column. And then when we do that, since we are just randomly saying it's player 1, we'll put a 1 there. Okay. So now I'm going to comment this out and put all zeros back in there. Okay, so we should have a 2D board that starts out with all the zeros. Then we're going to ask the user to put their stuff in at a particular index, given row, column, based off their input. Then we're going to put a 1 there. And then we're going to print it out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this in an infinite loop so we can put in multiple inputs without having to wait or restart. Okay, let's give it a try and see if it works. Okay, let's say we want to put it on the bottom right. So that'll be on row 1, which is the second row. And the bottom right side is the last column, so that would be column 1. There it is. Now let's say we want to put it at the top. Well, the top row is row 0, and that would be the first column, which would be at 0. there it is. Okay? And now bottom left, that's row 1, column 0. And finally, top right is row 0, column 1. All right, so that's an introduction to 2D arrays. And, any questions, just shoot me an email.